Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So of course we all celebrated the Supreme Court ruling in the UK that determined that the definition of a woman is a woman who is biologically female. There's no other sort of female. But you know what I mean. And of course, sporting bodies began to fall in line. The FA updated their transgender participation policy and basically banned male footballers from competing in women's football. The International Cricket Council also updated its policy. And we know that the Ultimate Pool Group also updated its transgender policy and banned transgender pool players from playing in women's competitions. We saw two transgender pool players, two male pool players, in the women's finals recently. So it was very much welcomed news. The police forces in the UK, unfortunately, they are dragging their feet in updating their policies, even to the point where male police officers who identify as trans are still allowed to strip search female suspects. A day after the landmark ruling on April 17, Chief Constable Rachel Swan, the diversity lead of the National Police Chiefs Council, told forces it welcomed the clarity, but insisted, quote unquote, "We will not rush our response." So while the sporting bodies are quick to update their policies, we are still seeing resistance from other organisations within the UK, like the police force, and now the teaching unions. The largest teaching union in the UK has said that trans-identifying males are still allowed to use women's bathrooms. Britain's largest teaching union has voted to campaign against the Supreme Court ruling on gender, insisting trans women in schools must be allowed to use ladies' toilets. So the National Education Union, NEU, is very much left-wing. They resolved on Saturday to advocate for trans teachers to continue to choose toilets according to gender identity. The judgement, which states a woman is defined by biological sex, effectively means a male-born trans person can be excluded from female-only spaces because the Supreme Court has established that a man with a certificate is still not a woman and cannot claim discrimination for not being allowed to use women-only spaces, female-only spaces. But women can certainly claim discrimination by having their private spaces taken away and opened up to men. Women can certainly seek legal recourse under the Equality Act 2010 for sex-based discrimination. So these teaching unions are there to support teachers, and that includes teachers who identify as trans. So they're saying that it's our job to support teachers and to make sure that they are not discriminated against. So if a trans-identifying male is saying that it's discrimination to be denied access to certain bathrooms, then this union is saying that they're going to back them. They're going to back a male teacher's so-called right to use the women's toilets. The Supreme Court clarification established that all of these policies that opened up women's spaces to men were essentially breaking the law this whole time. And apparently this teaching union doesn't see anything wrong with that. However, NEU's resolution means it may now intervene to provide legal assistance for trans teachers if they are banned from female toilets or girls' changing rooms. In theory, the union could also launch political pressure campaigns against similar policies for trans pupils. So Daniel Kebede, General Secretary, said, "The NEU is looking carefully at the Supreme Court ruling and its implications for employment. A toxic climate has been created in recent years in which trans people, a small community, are treated as if they are a risk or threat to others." So the NEU is perfectly happy with misogyny, is perfectly happy with a toxic environment being created for women, for female teachers. Apparently so.
Story, I guess, to begin with. Britain's largest teaching union wants to basically say that they're not going to pay any attention to the Supreme Court decision on trans women. And in fact, if any trans woman wants to use a female toilet in any school, then they should be allowed to use it.
It's incredibly frustrating. The Supreme Court was extremely clear on this for the purposes of the Equality Act and for the regulations that require single-sex toilets and changing rooms in schools, both for staff and for students. Trans women are men. That's biological men, and they should be using the men's spaces or a separate space but not the women's spaces.
Yes.
The Supreme Court is the authority in the land, and here's a union saying, ignore it. They are really cruising for legal action.
Right. And I mean, who would bring that legal action? Because I suppose there's quite a few public sector bodies that are kind of playing a bit fast and loose here, aren't they? The NHS have said the same thing in certain situations. If the teaching unions are saying it, that's going to put them at loggerheads maybe with the schools and the school governors. But who will police this, I suppose, is the question.
I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? We shouldn't be asking how can we get scofflaws in official positions to behave themselves, especially when they're the people who are meant to be forming the next generation.
Yeah.
I mean, parents could, and parents have in Scotland. There's a case that was won last week by parents complaining about their school going to solely gender-neutral toilets in obvious contravention of the law. But that takes time and it takes money, and not many people want to have a big argument with their children's school. I mean, really, this is down to the government. The DfE really has to say this very clearly. It has to give an instruction to all schools to obey the law. And then anyone who doesn't obey it, the government should be taking enforcement action.
So it's the same old story. We have these left-wing organizations or public bodies that are run by people who lean a certain way, and they are intent on ignoring the law. They are intent on defying the law because it doesn't fit with their narrative. It's not convenient for them. And unless they face real repercussions, many of them think they can just carry on doing it. So yes, it is up to the government to enforce the law and make sure that those who don't face repercussions. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, suddenly knows what a woman is now and has actually admitted what a woman is. So maybe, the Labour government will actually do something about this.
We saw protests this weekend in Bristol, as Paul mentioned, about the Supreme Court ruling. Do you believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment.
What are your words for the trans community who are worried about what this could mean for them?
Well, look, I think it is important that we have clarity about the law. That's what the Supreme Court is there for. So obviously that's an important and welcome step, and we go forward from there.
Absolutely disgraceful. For years, these same people pretended that they didn't know what a woman was. They denied science. They said it was offensive, or he said it was offensive to say that only women can have a cervix. And we didn't need clarity in this topic, but things had become so insane. We had strayed so far away from reality, and he was very instrumental in ensuring that we had to get the court to admit what the Equality Act's intentions were when it afforded sex-based rights to both males and females. And now there's no denying that. So the NEU, they can lobby, they can campaign, they can complain all they want, but the law is very clear. I don't think they're going to get anywhere, to be honest, except for cause a lot of headache and use a lot of resources in pushing this. That's what's going to happen in the end. But when it comes down to it, according to the Equality Act 2010, according to the law, you cannot force women to accept men into their bathrooms. You cannot force women to accept men into their changing rooms. That is discrimination against women. And that's how it stands. So, we shall see. It's very disappointing to see that this teaching union, the largest teaching union in the UK, can't even follow the law. Very, very disappointing to see that. And no rights have been taken away from anybody. It's not your right to go into the women's bathroom if you're male. So what they will be campaigning for is for men to impose themselves into women's spaces. What they're campaigning for, what they're going to be pushing, is nothing but misogyny. It's nothing but injustice against women.
Do you think this largest teaching union, which is, of course, I should name them, the National Education Union, do you think the government will come down on them like a ton of bricks legally if they break this or not?
I really hope so. That's their job, to do that. We shouldn't be needing to crowdfund so we can take certain organizations to court. We shouldn't have to do that. And enough time, enough resources has been wasted convincing people that women are women and men are men, and that men cannot be women. Enough time has been wasted doing that.
I hope they will. I mean, what I hope is that the government comes out with really clear guidance to schools, which we've been waiting, I think now 8 years for guidance to schools on this, not just about toilets, but about everything in terms of how they talk about sex and gender, and what do they do when there is a child in particular who is suffering from gender dysphoria or feels that they're not happy in their body. You know, schools have been saying to them, you can be the opposite sex. And I think what's really clear from the Supreme Court judgment now is that schools were selling these children a lie, and it was a lie that makes them unhappy and it makes them unsafe. They never should have done that. And I think now the government, the Department for Education, should come down with clear guidance for schools and come down on those that don't comply.
So yes, the Department of Education need to do their job. They need to offer clarity. They need to take into consideration the Supreme Court ruling and basically rewrite everything and start again from scratch. Start again on the basis of reality, on the basis of science, on the basis of biology, and make sure that the new guidelines reflect truth and facts. The girls' toilets are for girls, the boys' toilets are for boys. Same with men and women. It's as simple as that. And there usually is a single stall bathroom available anyway. So the Department of Education needs to issue these guidelines as a matter of urgency so we can put an end to this nonsense once and for all. With the new laws saying that any new buildings have to have designated female and male toilets and facilities and things like that. And now with the Supreme Court ruling, there is absolutely no excuse. No excuse. No one can now continue pretending that I don't know what a woman is, that I don't know what's appropriate and what's not. We can't allow these organizations to continue pretending, and they need to be held accountable. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.